Okay, folks, we are in Exodus, and we are coming into chapter 5. And how many of you did your homework and read this section? One of you, that's great. That's great. This has got some very interesting stuff in it, and I think that our hearts will be blessed by this. And previously on Exodus, when we were studying, the people heard the words that Moses had spoken to them, and they saw the confirming signs that he did with the staff in the hand and the water turning to blood. We don't know exactly what they saw, or which of those three signs. And then they believed what Moses told them, and they hastened to bow down to worship. And here is what comes next.
I was curious, I'm sorry to interrupt, but had any of you, or have you ever been taught that the people didn't know the Father's name at that time or before? Had anybody been taught that?
No, we were talking about that last week when he met Moses at the burning bush and discovered that we discussed that topic in relation to, it's highly likely that they knew the Father's name, but according to what our understanding of the Hebrew was, is that it said, kind of indicated that they had not experienced him in that way that name represented, although they knew the name. And so he kind of had revealed himself as Yehovah Almighty in a different kind of way, which we did discuss that and cover it somewhat. Did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Well, it was just that I know through the years there were a lot of people that were taught that the Father's name was never known to the people of Israel.
Oh.
Before that chapter 3.
Oh, yeah, right. No, obviously that's not true. I don't see that.
But what I thought was interesting, because Moshe was asking, what
shall I tell
name,
him? Yeah, right.
So people thought, well, Moses didn't know what his name was, okay? But if you look at chapter 4, verse 1, it says in here that the people, when Moshe went before the people, when he went back, they were saying, how do we know that Yahweh really appeared to you? So in chapter 4, it had to be obvious that the people did know his name. It was a test of what the actual experience, what actually occurred in chapter 3.
Sure.
The bush.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really awesome.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Okay, cool. So in Exodus 5, we'll do verses 1 through 5. So after this happened with the people bowing down to worship when they heard the good news that Moses had come to deliver them and they believed his message, afterward Moses and Aaron entered and said to Pharaoh, Thus says Yehovah, the Elohim of Israel, dismiss my people, that they may celebrate to me in the wilderness. Yet Pharaoh said, Who is Yehovah, to whose voice I should hearken to dismiss Israel? I do not know Yehovah, and moreover, Israel I shall not dismiss. Then they said, The Elohim of the Hebrews has met with us. Let us go, we pray, a way of 3 days into the wilderness, and let us sacrifice to Yehovah our Elohim, lest he come upon us with the plague or with the sword. Yet the king of Egypt said to them, Why, Moses and Aaron, are you causing the people to renounce their tasks? Go to your burdens. And Pharaoh said, Behold, they are now more numerous than the people of the land, and you cause them to cease from their burdens. Now, notice here that Moses and Aaron speak twice in this message to Pharaoh. They speak once and say, Here's what the God of Israel says. Pharaoh retorts, then they come back with some more information. And of course they seem to be invoking the name of Yehovah in the first speech, but the second one is without it. What is the difference, and what do you think that this might imply? They say basically, Thus saith Yehovah, And then he says, who is Yuvah? I don't know who this person, I don't know who this God is. I don't recognize this God. I think he may have known who this God is, but I don't think he's saying, I don't recognize the authority of this God. But then they come back and say, let us go, lest he come upon us with a plague or a sword. I mean, what's the difference between these two speeches by Moses and Aaron? First of all, let me kind of tease this out of you a little bit. What did the Father actually tell them to do? Talk to Pharaoh and tell him what?
He will let you go.
Let the people go. Did the Father tell Moses and Aaron that he was going to come upon the people with a plague or a sword if they didn't go?
I told Moses.
Did he?
Not yet.
That he was going to come upon the Israelis
No.
with plague or sword?
Oh. No, I'm assuming that he meant Egypt.
That's kind of what I'm talking about here. What is Moses talking about? It's because he seems to be saying, he says, let us go and let us sacrifice, lest he come upon us with the plague or with the sword. Is he talking about plagues hitting everyone and he's just including the Hebrews? Or is he talking about the Hebrews being stricken if they don't obey the word of Yuvah? What is your opinion there? Keith?
Even my Gentile version says the Hebrews are going to get the plague.
What about your translation, Mike? How do you read that?
It says us, not strike us with the plague.
So do you think he's referring to everyone in Egypt, or do you think he's talking about the Hebrews in particular?
Which verse? Oh,
That is,
okay, I see it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, at the end of verse 3.
Oh, yeah, it does say that in Hebrew. Yeah.
So do you wonder, did the fathers make some kind of threatening speech to Moses and saying, do this or I will strike the Israelites with plague and sword? I just thought that was... Or is that his fear? Or is that his fear speaking? Because we know...
Because he's still several times just asking Yahweh from they don't believe me, they don't do what I want, and his own people don't really obey him.
Yes, and remember that he keeps repeating, and he will again, like 3 times in this passage, I am a man of uncircumcised lip. Is this the symptom of an uncircumcised lip? I'm assuming it might be. When Pharaoh says, I do not recognize the authority of your God, and I am not going to let you go, then Moses speaks from his own authority and says that he voices his fear, let us go, or else our God will strike us. And is he playing upon Pharaoh's sympathies? No, probably not. But is he playing upon Pharaoh's fear of losing the Hebrews as slaves? He's saying, if you don't let us go 3 days into the wilderness to worship, God might strike us all dead and you'll lose all your servants anyway. But the Father did not speak those words that we have recorded here. So to me, this reads like an example of Moses speaking with an uncircumcised lip, speaking words that the Father did not speak. He confesses repeatedly, I am a man of uncircumcised lip. And we can see, I think, on several occasions, he does speak without the Father's authority. He gets busted for it. Yeah. I mean, and watch what happens immediately after this. And I got to wonder if there's a connection here, and we'll pick that up. Yes?
And a lot of times, like you were saying, I don't know, I can't remember the word you were using, but let go or let my people go. Mm-hmm. And it's an important Hebraic concept here. The word is shalach.
Send.
To send. So not only is he saying to Pharaoh, he's telling Pharaoh to send my people into the wilderness that they may worship me. Shalach, shaliach. Shaul is a shaliach, one who's sent. Mm-hmm. The same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the true meaning would be that Pharaoh's supposed to send them out.
He's supposed to be the guy
actual
who's following
sending part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or else.
Now, I think we kind of touched, or I touched on this, but I'd also like to have your ideas. Is this question of the king a legitimate or a rhetorical question? Is it likely that he had heard of Yuvah before?
I would have thought
Yes.
so.
I certainly would think so. I mean, they have enough gods in Egypt that they might, I would think that they would certainly be learned about the other gods of other lands around them.
Interested.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
Joseph, he probably heard about him.
Yeah, and we recognize that at the end, at the beginning of this thing, it says a new Pharaoh rose up over Egypt who did not know Joseph, and I think we kind of touched on that and said it's not likely that he didn't know who he was. If you look at the genealogy that is presented at the beginning of this book, not that much time has passed, and they're living to be a certain amount of. You can see there's a genealogy stuck right in the middle of this passage that we're going to read here, and there's only 3 generations there, and they lived 137 years each, approximately. So it's unlikely that this Pharaoh didn't know who Joseph was. What I think it was saying, and we talked about this previously, was that he did not recognize, or he rejected Joseph and what he had done for Egypt as get that guy out of here. His people have multiplied and they're more numerous than us now, and we got ourselves a problem on our hands. But so it's not likely that he's saying, who is Yuvah? I've never heard of this guy. I'm not going to recognize the authority. I think he's being defiant. And he's saying, I do not recognize the authority. I do not recognize this as a legitimate thing, even though there must have been some fear deep inside there to know, I do know who this God is and I know what he's capable of. But his attitude was coming out.
So earlier in chapter 4, part of the fear was Moses saying he wasn't sure what words would come out.
Mhm.
I'm not a good speaker.
Right,
And he says that I'll teach your mouth what to say.
right.
So do you think it's possible that he wasn't necessarily ad-libbing here, but that these were the words he was intended to speak at that time?
That is a very interesting idea.
I think that sounds like a good idea.
I like that, yeah.
Because I think there's an indication in Scripture that Yahweh spoke to Moshe's mind a lot.
Yeah, I think that certainly seems implied to me. And I think the test might be, there's a way I think we could possibly test that theory, is does Moses suffer some kind of consequences from the things that come out of his mouth or from his actions, But I can't think of, off the top of my head, maybe you can, of some time when he spoke with his words and he screwed up and he got in trouble. I mean, I know he struck the rock twice, but that was accompanied by words which expressed his frustration. What do I have to do, bring water from this rock, you rebels? So I think the words kind of went along with it. But, immediately after this passage, something bad happens and the oppression of our people increases tenfold. And so I don't know whether those things are connected. It would be unusual to me, anathema to me, to think about the concept of, well, Moses says something wrong and God punishes all the people. But there is precedence for that before. You think about when King David counted the people, and the avenging angel went through and killed a whole bunch of people, and yes, people were punished because of what David did.
Right. There were consequences.
Yeah.
Do
Jerry?
you think maybe that at this point in Moses' life he was what we would call a real young Christian? And he really wasn't sure what to expect from God. He'd had the 3 miracles, he'd seen that. But I think he might have thought he was going to go right in there, everything was going to happen.
I think,
Pharaoh was just going to jump right to his command, and it didn't work out that way.
yeah.
He wasn't really
I think the
sure what was
passages,
going on,
yeah, I think the passages coming right up show us pretty clearly that he was seriously disillusioned shortly
It just seemed that
hereafter.
way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption, especially since he was raised
In Pharaoh's
in Pharaoh's court, and yeah, he may have had some weird Gentile influences that did not exactly gear his mind towards, the task at hand. Mike?
Earlier in verse 1 there, I thought I heard you swap out the word feast for celebrate. Celebrate to me in the wilderness.
And let us sacrifice to Yahweh?
No, a little bit higher, where it says, dismiss my people that they may celebrate to me in the
Yeah, that's
wilderness.
what mine says.
Oh yeah, that they may celebrate to me in the wilderness.
People go into the desert to celebrate.
What is your
festivals.
thing?
I got feast.
That they may feast to me?
Yeah, and it's
Hold a
the-
feast to
Or
me.
to feast.
Hold a feast to me.
and it's, you know, to march in a sacred procession, observe a festival,
What's the word?
Let's see.
What's the Hebrew word?
Hagag.
Hagag?
Chag. A chag.
A Hajj.
Yeah, there's a whole concept of that. I believe, you know, as we read on, as we keep looking at this, you'll find that they use the word festival or celebrate, which is just totally. A chag is when a believer is totally submitted to Yah, and when they have the moed, and when we get together, they are gathering around to worship Yah. That's the essence, and to do what He said to do at that moed, at that appointed time.
Right.
And really, that's what it.
Yeah, I think it may have been a little. I think it was because of the Hebrew word there. It may have certainly been more accurate to say, "Dismiss my people that they may observe a feast or a festival to me in the wilderness." Probably would have been a better
That's
translation.
more Goyim, Gentile.
Yeah.
Let's have a party.
Let's have a party. Let's have a celebration. Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, you know, when I look forward to what's happening in this book, I don't really see him having any parties out in the desert there. It didn't turn out that way. So let's move forward a little bit.
They had a party with the golden calf.
Yeah, they did have one party, and that did not go
That didn't
very
go
well.
so well.
No, it didn't. So Exodus chapter 5, verses 6 through 14 says, "That is why, or hence, Pharaoh instructed on that day the exactors among the people and their superintendents, saying, You shall not continue to give crushed straw to the people to mold the bricks as before. They shall go and rake together crushed straw for themselves. You shall place on them the regular number of bricks which they were making before. You shall not diminish from it, for they are slackers. Therefore they are crying, saying, Let us go, let us sacrifice to our Elohim. The service shall be heavy on the men, and they shall make do with it, and not heed false words. So the exactors of the people and their superintendents went forth and spoke to the people, saying, Thus says Pharaoh, I am not giving crushed straw to you. As for you, go, take for yourselves crushed straw from wherever you may find, because there shall be nothing subtracted from your service. Hence the people scattered through in all the land of Egypt to rake together straw for crushed straw. And the exactors were rushing, saying, Finish your tasks, a day's tally in its day, just as when there was crushed straw given to you. Then the superintendents of the sons of Israel were being smitten, whom Pharaoh's extractors had placed over them, saying, For what reason did you not finish your statutory number of bricks, both yesterday and today, as you did before? Notice that it's interesting that just after Pharaoh and Moses and Aaron have this discussion about letting the people go, that he says, you're slackers. And he increases their burdens and makes them work twice as hard. Is there a connection, do you think, between what Moses had said in the instruction? Why did he increase their workload? I mean, it said, I think there's a bit of a hint here. It says, the service will be heavy on the men, and they will make do with the work and not heed false words. So what is he trying to do? Why did he do this?
He doesn't want to let them worship God.
Yeah.
And also, he wants to show his leadership.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's an authority move.
sure. Keith?
Well, his hope too is if he gets the people riled up, they'll turn on Moshe, and then they're not going to want to follow him or say don't go to Pharaoh anymore.
Interesting. I think that the interesting thing is that you have think about that you not pay heed to false words. That is at the end of verse 9. I'll just throw out there, what my thoughts are on it, and you can kind of let me know what you think. It almost seems to me that he is
Oh, goodness.
trying to maybe distract them. That into, if you're, if you're busy, your mind doesn't have time to think about certain things. In fact, sometimes we get caught up with our day-to-day lives and work and such, and we forget to pray, or our spiritual lives can take a bit of a hit as we get really distracted with other things. And my opinion on reading this was that perhaps Pharaoh, part of his intention was to make these people work really hard so that they wouldn't have time to think about the promising words of Moses,
Right.
to distract them from false words. And I think that there is definitely a principle for us, which I implied, is that if we get really distracted with lots of work, that we I know I do, tend to get, distracted with a lot of work and things going on in my life, and I can real easily set aside my dedicated time for prayer and the reading of the Word and such. My spiritual life can take a back seat a little bit, and I can get to feeling a little bit overwhelmed and kind of not pay attention to the things that really matter. And I think that may be a principle for us, is that Pharaoh is giving us a good example. And I think that might have been part of his intent, was to get these people working so much that they don't have time to think. And,
Makes a lot of sense.
calling them slackers. And I think he says that to him again in a minute. He's like, you're a bunch of slackers.
That's the principle of today, that we being in this captivity right now, and the ruler of this world is still here, the evil one, and we have to work harder and harder to purchase a loaf of bread. And then of course we have the, in Revelation chapter 5, is it 5 or 6? What is it? How much a day's work for
a loaf of bread and
bread?
for a
Well,
day's
who has
food.
time to be spiritual
Sure.
in that? That's where we're headed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, today those of us in our little congregation here, it's really, really hard to have one member of the family working, and I think that is clearly the intent of the adversary and the system that he's put in place over us, which is to keep us occupied. If you've got to have mom and dad both working in order to make ends meet and have any kind of, we'd like to have a car. Yeah, we'd like to have health insurance. We'd like to actually have a decent place, in a decent neighborhood where, we're not getting robbed or beaten or raped on the street, that we'd like to live in a safe place. Well, then mom and dad both need to work. And somebody else is going to raise the kids. And then you cannot keep the most important commandment, which is to teach your children. One of the most important commandments, at least that's certainly in my opinion, as fathers, as mothers, teaching the children is most important. If you don't teach the children, then the customs, the principles, the practices are lost. And this is a prime example of it here, and it is, of course, coming around full circle, like it always does in our own day. Our taskmasters are having us make bricks without straw. And it's an excellent strategy. And in fact, you notice in verse 14 here, it says, for what reason did you not finish your statutory number of bricks? That is a key little Hebrew word that's stuck in there. That is having to do with the law. This thing was written in the law. I think that's a clear implication from the Hebrew word. If you look that up in your Strong's or your Brown Driver Briggs, it's talking about, this is on the statute books, that he actually passed a rule and wrote it down and published it. No straw. Harder work. So what does that remind you of? In modern America, where we have more laws than anybody knows what to do with, and we can only keep a fraction of them, even if we even are aware that they exist.
You see the juxtaposition of the certain rate that they would collect at the manna every day.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got this law for heavenly bread or the word, and then you've got this fleshly
Yeah.
brick and straw.
Right.
That's
Excellent.
a burden.
Excellent comparison. I like that. Yeah, that's very good.
But yeah, and how do you see that? Where there are so many Israelites there, Hebrews, and more so than people under Pharaoh, and they have to scatter around to get all that straw. Were they really like people were controlling them? You know, like in the Second World War, it was easy in guns to control all the people. But
Yeah.
how do you hoard all those people? Were they just still allowed to kind of have certain freedoms?
Well, that's an
Go
interesting
back,
question.
Or, and then, you know, you make your
Yeah.
250 bricks, now you get enough food.
Right.
Or were they really in captivity with like, you know, like,
Well, you know that it's interesting. That's an excellent question that you have there, and I would relate that to this part that I was actually reading in my readings of the book of Samuel with the children this week, and it says that the Philistines did not allow any workers in steel to exist anywhere in the land of Israel, and so when the first king of Israel, King Saul, went to battle with the Philistines, he and his son Jonathan were the only ones who actually had weapons. And so the Philistines did not allow any workers in metal in the land of Israel. And if they needed their axe, they only had farm implements. And if they needed it sharpened, they had to go to the Philistines and pay to have their axe or their sickle or their ox goad sharpened for a certain fee. And so they did not allow them to have any weapons. There you go again with modern America. You know, they want to take away all the weapons. If you don't have a way to defend yourself, and then your government is saying work for a day's worth of bread, well then by golly, you're going to work because you have to eat. I mean, I don't know if you've seen, but I have seen plenty of these little survival shows, or even Survivor Island or whatever that show's called, Survivor, where people will do crazy and stupid things when they are hungry. I've read news stories about what happens in North Korea. That they've got these semi-like concentration camps of political dissidents and prisoners, and there are children running around trying to catch bugs and cats and rats and dogs and anything that moves or is alive. They will capture it, kill it, and eat it, and fight each other to eat it. And it's just, that's a good question, but and in my mind, you've got the Hebrews have a certain amount of freedom, but they have to go to the Egyptians to get bread, and it's also likely that maybe the Egyptians had weapons, but they would have completely disarmed the Hebrews so that there could be no resistance. But that'll make you
They were
realize.
slaves. I mean, the Israelites were slaves.
And I think I have to look at.
Essentially, Goshen was a kind of prison.
It became an occupation camp, yeah. Well, when I look at the Hebrew from previous chapters where it talks about the service and the labors that they were doing, it certainly seems to indicate to me in the Hebrew that they were all over the place doing all different kinds of jobs. They weren't just building things and making bricks, but they were servants in all different types of capacities.
Right.
That's what it seems to me to be saying, and so, but a servant nonetheless. So, let's.
Well, they would have had troops. They would have had.
Sure.
Would have had troops, just like the SS Gestapo in
Sure.
Germany.
Yeah.
Watching the people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to move forward a little bit to chapter 15 or chapter 5, verses 15 through 23. So it goes a little bit more into this. So then the superintendents of the sons of Israel entered and cried to Pharaoh and said, "Why are you doing thus to your servants? Crushed straw is not being given to your servants, and of bricks they are saying to us, 'Make them.' And behold, your servants are being smitten, and your people are at fault." Yet he said, "You are slackers. Slackers. Therefore you are saying, 'Let us go, let us sacrifice to Jehovah.' Yet now go and serve, but crushed straw shall not be given to you, though the regular number of bricks shall you provide." Hence the superintendents of the sons of Israel saw themselves in an evil plight, having to say, "You shall not subtract from your bricks a day's tally in its day, And so they came upon Moses and Aaron, stationed to meet them when they came forth from Pharaoh. They said to them, May Jehovah see you, and may he judge, since you have caused our scent to stink in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants, giving a sword into their hands to kill us. And Moses returned to Jehovah and said, Jehovah, why have you done evil to this people? And why is this that you have sent me? For since I entered to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people. Yet you have not rescued your people. Fascinating section here. What do you imagine are the work arrangements here? It seems to me that we have a combination of Hebrew overseers with Egyptian overseers above them. And the Egyptian overseers are beating the Hebrew overseers, who are verbally beating their people under them, saying, I'm sorry, guys, but do it. Do it. Do it. They've got a sword. They're going to kill us. Do what you got to do. Is that how you see that? Does it read that way to you? Is that how you understand it? Okay, I just wondered what your thoughts were on that. So it seems like now I know that if you see the
Well, that's what I saw in the Ten Commandments.
yes, I think I was waiting for Keith to say, well, that's what the movie said. But yeah, if you see the movie with Charlton Heston, I think there were a couple of them that made him out to be like collaborators, and that certainly could be the case. It certainly could be.
You were saying that you were gleaning that from the.
Oh, I wasn't saying that. I was simply saying that. Yeah,
Is it possible?
Well, I'm not saying that they were necessarily sympathizers, but that they did. I mean, it makes sense that they would have a Hebrew overseer over Hebrews. Maybe the languages did not mix very well, and they needed, they just gave the instructions to somebody who could speak Egyptian, and they passed the message down, and if they didn't follow the instructions, the superintendent got beat.
And it's a strategy in war, what they always do every war.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. You put one of the people in charge of their own people. Maybe you find that they are desirous of having power over people, and you make them a puppet master.
Well, you saw that in the Nazi concentration camps, where the Jewish people were exactly put in that position.
Well, and if you are in a suffering population and you are promised, you know what? You and your family can eat, but we need you to persuade your brethren.
Right.
Just do what needs to be done. And of course, I'm not saying that they were all collaborators. There may have been plenty of them who were good-hearted people and said, I'll do the job lest you do it yourself. Maybe I can protect my people. So, just an interesting thought. Why do you think that the Hebrew superintendents are blaming the Egyptians for the beatings? At the end of verse 16, it says, your servants are being made to make bricks, and your own people are at fault. What does that mean? How are the Egyptian people at fault for the fact that the Hebrews are being beaten for not collecting enough bricks?
I think it's from the lack of common sense of the situation to demand the same thing, despite there's no extra hours in the day and it's not extra people aren't getting stronger or something. It's just physically ridiculous.
Yeah, that could be. I was just curious. It seemed kind of weird that there was like this one statement that said it's your own people's fault. I was like, how's that possible? Why is that?
Alan, wasn't he saying one thing? They said that crushed straw was not being given to them to make the bricks, but they're still demanding the bricks to be made. So isn't that why that statement was said?
So when he says your own people are at fault, is he referencing the slave masters who have said make bricks without straw?
Or when
I may be reading more into it than is actually
It's a
there.
form of mental torture, it would seem. I mean, you're in a difficult situation as it is as slaves, and then you're told to make things that you're not given the tools or whatever or the things to make it, and then your tormentors are tormenting you on top of it.
Yeah.
Right.
So they're basically saying it's not our fault, it's your fault. I mean, it's obvious.
Right.
It's okay. So yeah, that's pretty much what you were saying. Yeah, that makes sense to me. It just was kind of worded in a weird way. It's like, how can you blame the normal Egyptian people? But I think it's probably referencing, well, it's your command that has caused this. So yeah, that probably makes more sense. Notice here that when the work increases, does not seem to distract the people, then there are beatings. Is there a principle or a prophecy at work here? The additional work does not seem to be distracting the people, and so beatings commence. What's that? What's the principle here?
What do you mean by distracting?
Well, remember he says previous section, get to work, and not take heed to these lying words of Moses. And we discussed the principle of keeping busy to distract you from the promises and stuff.
Okay.
And so notice here that when the work increase does not seem to distract the people, then the workload, not only do we have a strong workload now, but we're getting beatings. It's like the persecution has increased. It started off we were slaves. Then they take away one of the key ingredients that we need, and we have to run around and do it ourselves, and the slavery becomes even more oppressive. And now there's beatings because we can't complete the task that we don't have the tools to do. It's becoming increasingly and progressively more oppressive, and it is this stratagem that we discussed possibly was in Pharaoh's mind to distract the people is not working, and he then resorts to violence. Do you think that there is a principle at work there, and do you think that is something for us in our day? I don't want to go into conspiracy theories or anything, but I mean, I remember a couple of years back, it was like people were talking about FEMA concentration camps, and they had coffins everywhere, millions of them, and they're going to kill us all and bury us and put us in, FEMA camps and such.
Well, you mentioned that
Uh-oh.
about the camps. They did buy guillotines too, but.
Oh my goodness!
But under the guise of our government, as far as did anybody else get their beating this week? I don't know. I mean, as far as that goes, when you're not living up to your tasks, the threats of downsizing and this and that.
I kind of wonder too, just from a broader sense, Pharaoh's getting frustrated at this point, so let the beatings begin. But if you kind of back out from that a little bit, we see that them following what Pharaoh wants done is going to lead them to death eventually. I mean, you can only go so long before your body's just going to give out at that rate. Yeah. And what's interesting in this word that I think you used the word tally, the amount that they were picking up. Mm-hmm. Mine says matter of a day, and it's the same word, which is rate, or debar, which is word, that's used in picking up the bread every day. So are you going to follow after God and what he wants you to do to see if you'll follow in his way, which leads to life, or are you going to follow after Pharaoh in his way, which is going to lead to death?
That makes it very difficult, though, Mike, because you don't really have much choice except to face death, perhaps. You put a sword into the people's hands to kill us. So that's a tough choice to make, but in death comes life as well.
Just a thought, but there's a possibility that when Moses came on the scene and he went to see Pharaoh, it just made the people who were inspired with a little bit of hope, and now they've got a hero. And even though what didn't come to pass that they was hoping would come to pass, they're still inspired because this isn't all over yet. Pharaoh doesn't like it, so he starts beating them down because he doesn't want them to have any hope. Mm-hmm. He just wants them to keep digging like dogs that they are.
Yep.
Like he thinks they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or you said race, that's maybe another thing as well.
I think fear is definitely at the back of it, yeah. Ani?
Yeah, when I see it as a spiritual journey, they were servants of Pharaoh, and it represents the house of bondage and how they got delivered. And so it's really interesting how their burdens increased at first. Even God was already at work. I mean, he spoke to Moses and he gave Moses this mission. So there was no faith in the people. And there was also no faith in Moses at first, because he's criticizing Yahweh and says, why have you done this to your people? Mm-hmm. So not only in some sense, that's Pharaoh not know Yahovah, his people, also don't know him yet. And they have lived in Egypt so long, and Yahovah hasn't really, through Joseph some things, but he was kind of not so close to them. And now he's calling them out. And I think there's a lot of parallels that because we are supposed to come back to the promised land, to leave the house of bondage, to leave what's in the world, to leave paganism, to leave the culture, to leave the gods that we have served, and that whose servants we were and we are. And so just that the first step is kind of getting worse, and they're already complaining, and like they did even worse in the desert. They said, why have you brought us out in the desert, and now we have only manna to eat, and we had it so good in Egypt, and now you're kind of complaining here. Why have you done, God, you made it all worse for us. You started to interfere, and now look what's happening.
Yeah, that is an excellent principle. When you look at this last phrase here from Moses saying, God, what are you doing? You haven't delivered your people at all. Ever since I've spoken, things have just gotten worse. And I think that you hit the nail on the head. There is going to be some pain for each of us as we leave those familiar places, those familiar things, those practices and ideas and things that we had been clinging to that were not good for us. It does bring discomfort for sure, as the truth hurts sometimes, but it's like needing an amputation or pulling a Band-Aid off nice and slow versus fast. It's just, to me, that's kind of the way I read it.
Is there not a prophetic parallel here for today?
I certainly think there is.
Good grief. Israel how many years had been prophesied that Israel would be regathered again as a nation? And many Christian pastors thought they'd never live to see that day. In 1948 it happened. Now Israel's regathered back to the land, and right now there is, you look at the situation of Israel right now, and everybody wants to kill them. Hezbollah has 70,000, 80,000 rockets to the north. You got Russia in there now, which is the Gog and Magog, part of the Gog-Magog element. And just the whole situation. Things are getting worse. They're not getting better.
The hatred for the state of Israel has always baffled me. It seems so irrational. It's like, I don't understand how the world sympathizes with the terrorists. And I think, man, this is completely upside down. And why do we hate these people so much that we will cheer for their enemies? And, they've got a little place the size of New Jersey, and we just can't have that. It's the weirdest thing. It's like a supernatural hatred of God's people that is just hard to fathom.
Doesn't it say it in the Torah that Yah said that the Arab people, to Ishmael, that your people are, that Ishmael's people and the people of Edom and so forth will have enmity towards your brothers, Israel.
And he's a wild donkey of a man, and his hand is against everyone, and everyone's hand is against him. He's a troublemaker. But what's weird to me is to see the whole world, or a good portion of it, siding with the troublemaker.
But if we get rid of Israel, all the trouble will go away.
Yeah.
Isn't that the logic?
Yeah, that is the logic, but it's not logical. That's the problem. In my brain, which I think happens to function correctly, it doesn't make any sense.
But here's the whole thing again. It says, send my people that they may worship me. So Israel's there. And the world's saying, we want you out of here because you're going to cause our destruction. And, you have the same
Yeah.
kind of scenario going on all over again.
You know, it occurs to me as you're speaking there that, you know, the fact of the matter is that you do have all these Bible prophecies about Israel being regathered, and all of a sudden there's Israel in the land in 1947, and it really does kind of send this big signal flags up to everybody saying, trouble, big trouble. And they're saying, well, gosh, well, let's just get them out of there and maybe we can avert the trouble. I don't think so. That's not the way the plan's going to work. So I think we've kind of covered this, but I just think we need to think about this, that, just remember, I think that you would think, and I know that you had spoken about this on it, that, Moses goes and says, I've got it, I spoke to God and I've got the plan and he's going to deliver us, and he does signs and wonders and everybody says, huzzah! And then things go worse. Beatings commence and the people are dispirited and they're saying to Moses, what were you thinking? This is not helping at all. And Moses is even saying, God, what are you doing? You're not helping us at all. In fact, you know when you see in the Hebrew, you have not rescued. Not rescued. It's said twice. It's something, he's really frustrated. But I think about it like this. Just like you said, Anna, that the people have something in their hearts that needs to be purged. That's not comfortable being purged, or lancing a boil, or chopping off a leg that's got gangrene. The rot must come out. And persecution, nothing works like persecution to get your heart straight. I have experienced that in my own life, and I know you have too. When the fecal matter comes in contact with the fan, you are put in a position where you have to begin to evaluate some things and make some changes. And nothing will do that like persecution. I had a pastor once tell me years and years and years ago that there is no growth without struggle. And I think that is absolutely true. Like if you help a baby bird out of its egg, bad idea. Slicing open the cocoon to let the butterfly out, bad idea. It will die. It will not work. It needs that struggle to come out, to exercise its strength. And the Father knew what he was doing. The people didn't, and they were struggling and crying out and going, what is happening? But the Father knew. This must happen to make your hearts ready and willing to hear me and do, and you have to come to the end of your rope. You've heard that from all of your pastors all your lives. It's definitely true. You got to come to the end of your rope before you're willing to relinquish control and saying, I can do nothing.
I mean, it also says that Yahovah hardened Pharaoh's heart. So it was Yahovah who made Pharaoh not let them go right away. Pharaoh would have let them go right away, there wouldn't have been any plagues, right?
Sure.
But there was a reason.
Yeah.
All this happened.
But from our side, we look at it, we don't understand the reason, we don't see things from that perspective. And I got to think to myself that once they got out of there, they, the wise among them probably said, I think I understand now. If our lives had been a little less burdensome, a little more cushy, we may have been perfectly happy to just stay in Egypt where we were. They did have food, they did have a place to sleep. But what a miserable existence, that's this living for the flesh entirely. And that's what they draw to. We remember when we had food, when our appetites were fed.
There's something about work as well. It tends to give us a purpose while we're here.
Yeah.
Like you said, a distraction.
Yeah.
When you're out in the desert and you're wandering around, what do?
We think too much. We look for things to complain about. Yeah, absolutely. That is funny, but very true. So moving forward just a little bit, in chapter 6, verses 1 through 9. So now Yehovah says to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, for under a steadfast hand he shall dismiss them, and under a steadfast hand he shall drive them out from his land. Elohim spoke to Moses and said to him, I am Yehovah, and I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as the El who suffices. As to my name Yehovah, I was not fully realized by them. However, I set up my covenant with them to give to them the land of Canaan, the land of their sojournings in which they had sojourned. Moreover, I myself have hearkened to the moaning of the sons of Israel, whom the Egyptians are making servants, and I am mindful of my covenant. That is why you will say to the sons of Israel, I am Yehovah. That is why I will bring you forth beneath the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rescue you from their service. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. I will take you to me as a people. I will become to you as Elohim, and you will realize that I am Yehovah, your Elohim, who brought you forth from beneath the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land which I lifted up my hand in swearing to give it to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a tenancy. I am Yehovah. Now when Moses spoke these words to the sons of Israel, they did not listen to Moses because of shortness of spirit and hard service. Notice how Elohim responds to the criticism of Moses regarding his timing. Why this recitation of his character and his promises? What is this meant to achieve? This is how God responds to Moses complaining. Here's who I am. How's that supposed to encourage Moses? Do you think it is encouraging?
Yeah. It's, I don't know, kind of makes me think of the idea of, not by power, not by might, but by the Spirit. And our, we want our God to do crazy things instead of maybe just being satisfied with who He is and what He does say that He does for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, I know that it can seem a little bit weird, but these words are very encouraging, although they seem fairly straightforward, and there's not a lot of, there's not a lot of tender words here to say, oh, I love you, and I'm going to take care of you, and everything's going to be okay. He's not talking in that way. He's saying, I am who I am, and I'm going to do exactly what I promised to do. And now you will see what I have intended to do. It is an encouragement to me because he is swearing by himself, saying, I am the one who made promises, and I always keep my promises. And if you knew your history, you'd know that I keep my promises.
It seems to me that this is a point in time when Satan and God kind of get into it, because if Satan can wipe out Israel, he's defeated God. Because then God cannot keep his promises and give Israel everything that they want. And if that happens, we're all doomed. Because then Satan would have become the victor. So besides this, this has been going on it's still going on today. It's going to go on in Ezekiel 37, 38. It's going to try to destroy him again.
Yeah.
And he'll never, he's a progressive. He'll never quit until he gets beat.
He's a progressive. Yeah, true that. Notice how the people, oh, sorry, go ahead. Is that you, Mike?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I was just wondering, your last statement was said about knowing their history. So, at this point in time, prior to this, when Joseph came in and stuff, the assumption is that from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, they all knew this promise that was given, and that they were in this land, and then they were going to be taken out of this land and become slaves, and then eventually come back. Is the understanding that all of these people knew these promises that were given to that family at this time? So he reminds him of this covenant. Is he knowing this?
I certainly think so. When I think about it, I think I'm feeling that way, and I think that you guys probably are as yourselves. Just experiencing the difficulty, the turmoil that this world is bringing to us, and I don't have hope that Donald Trump is going to fix the United States. I don't have hope that Hillary Clinton is going to fix the problems of the United States. I don't have hope that the United Nations is going to fix the problems that the world is suffering. I know that each of us is looking around and seeing the world just coming unzipped. It's kind of like what we were talking about a minute ago with this backwardness regarding the state of Israel, and we're siding with the enemies of Israel. And you know, the half the United States wants to be socialist and the other half wants to, you know, rebel. You know, I don't have hope that this thing is going to be solved at all. But I do have hope that our Father has made promises, these same exact promises that he is reiterating here. I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that I am taking you to that land. Now, that is my hope. That is your hope. Now, I know that we weren't taught that in Christianity for most of our lives. It's like, well, you're going to die and you're going to go to heaven and you're going to sit on a cloud and listen to some heavenly music and worship the Father for the rest of your timeless existence. But that's not the promise at all. The promise is you're going to this land where I'm going to establish a literal, physical kingdom, and we will all live there, and it will last forever. And, you know, this is the promise. And since I've learned the promise, I'm thinking to myself, then I've talked to my kids about this because we're going through some of the kings of Israel. And it's like, you know, this kind of sucks. You know, they only had a couple of good kings. I'm like, well, you know, that's true. And there's a principle here. You know, if you've got a people who is evil and is following after their own hearts, they're going to elect a leader, or they're going to demand a leader, or the leader is going to reflect the mood and character of the people. You're going to get exactly what you deserve. But if your heart is desirous of following Yahweh and you repent, he will give you a leader that reflects your heart. So to me, I look at this and I say, I so want to live in a land of freedom, real freedom, with a king who makes the right decisions and has the right policies and is ruling with real righteousness and real justice and real equity, something that we've never seen. I mean, we keep toying with political persuasions. We've got communism and socialism and capitalism and feudalism, oligarchy, just crazy stuff that we've been trying to build this Thomas More's utopia for generation after generation. And it doesn't work because we're all waiting for this same promise. That's my hope.
And I guess because this is all pre-written Torah, you know, and this promise was passed down, you know, right within the family.
Yeah.
And then now there's a ton of Hebrews. And I guess my thought is if the...
Well, is your thought that there's certainly, I mean, if they're in this crappy situation, that wouldn't that be something that they would be holding on to?
Yeah, and that's, you know, why wouldn't they want to leave?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That certainly makes sense to me.
Well, some would be holding on to it and some wouldn't. It's kind of the same old story of the wheat and the tares, isn't it?
Sure.
And I mean, you know, I will bring you up out of your graves that you may live before me.
Mm-hmm.
Ezekiel 37.
Yeah.
So they're living in a grave. We're living in a grave compared to what we have that Yah has for us, as you spoke about when He does bring us back to the land, when our Mashiach comes back and is ruling and is king, and then things will be
how they're supposed to be.
Then we'll be been brought out of our graves.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
That's true life.
And I have to think, Mike, that these people, you know, being in this kind of servitude, you know, that it's the only thing that I could imagine that they would have, you know, is stories from, you know, how people are telling stories and they have their own mythologies. I mean, I imagine that this was a strong notion amongst the Hebrews, is that we were only supposed to be here a little while and we are leaving here. I mean, certainly, you know, remember the stories? I would think they would have to believe that.
It's weird though thinking about it all. I just can't help but feel that it's just clearly a lack of faith, especially since all these people, they all die except for
Joshua and Caleb, yeah.
So it's like...
And why do you think that is? Well, I mean, you know why it is, but it sucks, doesn't it? And you know what? I think about that in relation to the modern time right now, and I'm thinking, boy, I sure hope that I'm not going to die in the wilderness and my sons are going to actually enter the kingdom just like this. I'm thinking, Maybe it's my parents that are going to die in the wilderness.
Well, and you have the, I'm sorry.
No, you go.
I was just thinking you have this promise that you said it's being passed down, right?
Mhm.
This anticipation
Yeah.
for their freedom and their land and their inheritance.
Yep.
If we're looking at that from a pattern perspective and what's going to happen during the second coming, or when he comes back, and what are the people that are desperately waiting for that promise right now? Are they going to rebel this way when those things start to come into play?
Don't they have to, Mike?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking, don't they have to? Isn't it going to repeat itself?
Right.
Is the bricks without straw taking the mark of the beast? 666?
You never know, man.
So-
Don't they just about have to on it?
I wanted to mention here where it says he will bring them out of the Egypt by with a stretched out arm, or the hand, the arm is a clear refers to the Messiah.
Mm.
And I don't know if you want to read it, but in Isaiah 53 verse 1, it refers to
The servant?
the arm, the stretched out arm as the Messiah.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a clear
Zoroa.
link.
Yes.
My right.
Yeah,
Zoroa.
he's always referred to as either being at the right hand of the Father or being the right hand of the Father. So yes, I think that's an excellent indication that these judgments upon the gods of Egypt and the people worshiping the gods of Egypt, because I think we need to remember that as we come close here to this section, is that this is a judgment against the gods of Egypt and anyone who is worshiping the gods of Egypt. This is not a punishment against the Egyptians themselves. And that, yes, you are absolutely right, that that is Yeshua executing judgment, just exactly as he is in the book of Revelation. Very,
And
very
also
similar.
the deliverance through Yeshua.
Then the deliverance by the right hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
In here, it uses the word with the yod, the hand, chazakah. The chazakah, mighty hand. And chazak is something very, very mighty. Remember when I raised about knowing our Father's name?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, here it is. It says here, here's the verse that seems that is taught, and even the way it reads here in the NIV, it says here in 6, I guess it's around 2 or 3, my eyes can't focus on the little tiny numbers, but where he says, I brought you out with a mighty hand, and he says, I am Yahweh, I appeared to Abraham, to Yitzhak, and to Yaakov as El Shaddai, but my name, Yahweh, I did not make myself known to them.
Now,
Now,
my
here's
translation
teaching
says, by that name I was not fully realized by them. I think that's a better translation.
But the Hebrew says something else. It's a Hebraism.
Mm-hmm.
What it really is saying is, but my name, Yahweh, did I not make myself known to them?
Mm.
That's what it's saying.
Interesting assertion.
Because just the way it's written in the Hebrew, it's a rhetorical question.
Yeah. Okay.
But yet it gets translated in mine and the NIV as they never knew my name.
Right, because
But that's not what it was really trying to say in Hebrew.
Right, because they're not reading the Hebrew right.
Is that how you read it, Mike?
Big difference.
Does it seem to be saying that to you? Did I not make myself known to them? Is it a rhetorical question?
Yeah, it's
Because I found the same kind of pattern, Mike,
6
in other scriptures, and I couldn't understand why is it as another example where it says Yahweh is not Yahweh, it says Yahweh is our Father. Is this not so? And the pattern of words, lo, is used in the same kind of pattern, and it comes out as a question instead of as a statement that I didn't make my name known to them. Well, it's not that. It's did I not make myself known to them?
I think that's certainly possible, and I think, frankly, that if you look at it either way, it makes good sense. Did I not make myself known to them? Yes, he did. Did he not make fully realize to them that aspect of his character in deliverance? No, he did not. That was coming now. So I think it makes sense to read it both ways. I think it could be important to realize it both ways. But I think that dualism could be at play there. That's just my opinion. I'm not sure.
Well,
I haven't
he's
studied
saying
the...
to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he did make himself very well known.
Yeah, I think it's clear to me from the scriptures that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob knew his name, Yehovah.
But they knew
But
that
as far as...
they saw him working in their lives too,
Yes, true.
in the power of that.
Yeah, that's good. That's a fair characterization. Fair characterization. Back to this here for a second. Notice how the people are now characterizing as having a shortness of spirit. What does this mean? And what are its implications for today as we ourselves try to wait patiently for Elohim to fulfill his promises? Do we know people? Are we ourselves experiencing a shortness of spirit? What do you think is meant by a shortness of spirit? They couldn't even listen.
They were dwarves.
I think that's what it's... Spiritual dwarves. It seems that way. I mean, they because of their oppression and their disbelief, they're being crushed, and they're experiencing frustration, and they're not being delivered, and they are losing patience.
Verse 9.
Yeah, and in verse 9 there, and that's to me very difficult for us to keep up our spirits in these days. It was just today that 2 high school kids killed themselves in the bathroom at a local high school. And you now have, it's unfortunate that in our day we have young people who are experiencing so much frustration that the world is not what they were told that it was or what they had hoped it would be, and they are now killing themselves in taking down as many people as they can to go with them. I mean, you realize really that these school shootings and mass shootings, this is just a suicide on a big level. I'm killing myself and I'm taking you all with me. And believe me, as a former high school teacher experiencing these youth, and then because I am a nice guy and I befriend them and I still know them and I still talk to them. In fact, one of my former students is outside right now with Johnson. And these people are struggling. They do not know what to do with themselves. That is a shortness of spirit. And I think, I have family members and people that I know who are in their 20s right now they just don't know what's going on. They are really struggling. The world is not what they thought it was, and it's smacking them hard.
I also think it means impatience. Like if things don't happen right away, we get a promise from God and it gets worse at first, so we kind of lose our faith instead of... It says long suffering is a kind of
a fruit of the Spirit, yeah.
And,
yes, it is. It's tough. It's tough out there, and I think we need to be strengthened and fed by that word every day, or we also can become short of spirit.
How many years did it take till Yitzhak was born
Oh,
to
yeah.
Sarah? How many in her, how old?
99 years old.
100 years old?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was promised when he was 90, and so it took 10 years before the promise happened.
I think it's 25 years actually.
I think he was 75, and it wasn't until he was 100 when it happened, so it was 25 years.
25 years.
That's a long time to wait for a promise to be fulfilled.
But the promise was made. That's the key.
Yes,
Yeah.
the
So we
key
have
is
all
the
these
promise is made.
Promises that have been made.
Yes.
And some of them, we have a whole section of them
Yeah.
that have been fulfilled.
And you can also look at the fact that our Messiah arrived on the scene and promised the kingdom 2,000 years ago.
Yes.
That's got to test a lot of people's patience right there. I was watching some Jewish program attacking Christianity just this week. One of my Jew friends sent me trying to convert me to Judaism, telling me Jesus promised the kingdom, and he couldn't fulfill his promise, and he was just another false prophet, and I said, you don't know what you're talking about. He He said the kingdom is at hand. I said, you don't know what that means at all, obviously. But no, I think that having patience and the longevity that is a fruit of the Spirit, it's tough, man. It's really tough, and we need to hang in there because it's tough.
But the people of the Yehudim many of them are blinded.
Yes,
And
just
we
like
know
Paul
this to
said.
be true.
Yeah.
And we know that, what is it, in Romans 11, I mean, that's just the way it is.
It's coming to an end, though.
Temporary.
It's coming to an end.
Yeah.
Which people are blinded?
The Jews.
Yeah.
Yehudim.
Jewish people are
Okay.
blinded.
He's speaking Hebrew to you, and I hope that you'll learn it.
Sorry.
Yehudim.
Sorry.
Oh, that's funny. I want to go forward just a little bit. We got this little section here. So in verse 10 through 13, it says, Then Yehovah spoke to Moses, saying, Enter, speak to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, that he may dismiss the sons of Israel from his land. So he's repeating his instructions after Moses said, What are you doing? You're not saving us at all. He says, Go back. Do it again. Yet Moses spoke before Yehovah, saying, Behold, the sons of Israel are not listening to me. How shall Pharaoh listen to me when I am of uncircumcised lip? There he goes again with his uncircumcised lip. Then Yehovah spoke to Moses and to Aaron and instructed them as to the sons of Israel and as to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring forth the sons of Israel from the land of Egypt. Again, I don't think we need to belabor this point, but here is Moses again bringing up his uncircumcised lip, having a little lack of faith in himself, I think, is the obvious implication here. But you notice something very interesting. If you look at this in the Hebrew, in verse 13, if you look at verse 13 in the Hebrew, it's very interesting phrasing, both in Hebrew and in this English verse here. Yehovah spoke to Moses and to Aaron and instructed them as to about the sons of Israel and Pharaoh. It's almost a mysterious statement that seems to be suggesting that Moses and Aaron were pulled aside and given some special insight or something into how this was going to work out, or because he's not getting it, and he's saying, I did exactly what you sent me to do. Things got worse. You haven't saved the people at all. They're crushed in spirit, and now you're giving me the same instructions. But then Yehovah spoke to Moses and Aaron and instructed them as to the sons of Israel and to Pharaoh. What do you imply from that? Do you think there's something mysterious going on there?
Maybe they had a little sidebar talk.
That's what it seems
That's what
like.
it sounds like, doesn't it?
It's what it seems like to me when you read that passage in the Hebrew and in the English. It seems like there's a little sidebar going on there, and that he's like pulling them aside and saying, let me give you a little bit of insight here. And I certainly think it would be called for, as Moses is at a loss for words, and he's like, I am uncircumcised of lip. Again, he repeats that and says, I don't know what's going on here. This isn't working at all. And I think it's certainly implied here, and it could certainly be that God is speaking to them and saying, let me give you a little bit. Let me peel back the blinders just a little bit and give you a little bit of insight about what I'm going to do. Because he says in that previous passage, now you will see what I'm going to do. And some of the Hebrew commentaries from our rabbis say that's what this is referring to. He says, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. Is referring back to this, that he was going to give him maybe a vision, maybe some keen spiritual insight about what was actually going to happen in order to strengthen his faith, in order to go into that. But what's interesting is that in the next section, we're suddenly interrupted with a genealogical record.
Oh, yeah.
That's a curious little twist, isn't it? That all of a sudden we've got, these are the heads of their fathers' houses. The sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, are Hanok and Palu, Hezron and Carmi. These are the families of Reuben. What is going on here? We have this little genealogical record stuck right in the middle of this.
He leading up to Moses' birth, doesn't he?
Yeah, that's interesting. A couple of interesting tidbits from this. This is not a genealogical chart of all 12 tribes of Israel. This is only a genealogical chart of only the first 3 tribes of Israel. And then it's an expanded genealogical chart of only one tribe, the tribe of Levi. In fact, it goes into the future with Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron. Huh. What do you think is what do you think about that? And not only that, but it gives you gives you some of the lineage of Korah, the rebels. This is not stuck here for no reason.
Right.
What do you think it might be? Why is it giving us the lineage of the first 3 tribes and then focusing in on the tribe of Levi and then focusing down all the way to Phinehas, expanding on Korah a little bit, and then right after that it says this Aaron and this Moses are the ones that Yehovah told bring forth the sons of Israel from the land of Egypt according to their hosts. They were the speakers to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, to bring forth the sons of Israel from the land of Egypt. This Moses and this Aaron. It came to be on the day when Yehovah spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt that Yehovah spoke to Moses saying, I am Yehovah. Speak to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, all that I am speaking to you. And yet Moses said before Yehovah, behold, I am uncircumcised of lip. So how shall Pharaoh listen to me? It's, interesting that I have an uncircumcised lip. Here's my family history. I have an uncircumcised lip. It's a very interesting.
That's why he brought Aaron into the picture.
Yes, that is precisely why he had brought Aharon into the picture.
Well, he spoke for him. Yeah.
I mean, why is it that Moses is making sure that he knows exactly who we're talking about? I mean, are there other Moshes and Aharons in the congregation that we might be confused about? I mean, there certainly could be, but he's going to some particular pains here to make sure that the reader knows who he's talking about, because he has not at all referred to himself in the first person singular, saying I. He's never used that phrase. He's speaking of himself in the third person and not like the royal we. So it is certainly curious, but I believe that part of it is having to do with describing for us the lineage of the tribe of Levi from which he came in order to identify himself within the families of the tribes, and also to give us a little foreshadowing about the certain line of the tribe of Levi that will kind of separate with Phinehas or Pinchas and the righteous line of the sons of Levi compared to and contrasted with Korach, the rebellious one. What do you think the time?
Is this the rebellious? Yeah, I have to see.
Yeah, that's Korach who led the rebellion and was swallowed up by the earth.
Korah, and then there's
fire there that died.
because
Phineas and
Korah was a
Oh, that was Nadab and Abihu,
oh, okay.
the first 2 sons of Aaron, who were smitten by either fire or a bolt of lightning. I'm not sure. Yeah, and so I think that he's presaging, what is going on with his family, and making sure that we can identify who he is and what his place is, and also to remember as things develop here that Moses is going to have a special relationship with the Father as a member of the tribe of Levi. We need to remember that Moses and Aaron, brothers, are kind of like representing the king and the Levite. Maybe even in the line of the Melchizedek. Okay, a king and a priest, Moses and Aaron.
I've always thought that Moses was like the unspoken high priest during it, until from the time God called him till the time Aaron actually took on the role during that.
Well, it's interesting. Moses kind of leads in the in a way, kind of like a Melchizedek, a king priest, because he does make sacrifices. He is allowed to go into the tent. He speaks. He is a Levite, and yet he is, fulfilling some of the duties of a king as well. So that's an interesting.
He seems to be the main. He is the intercessor.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
He takes the role of the main intercessor.
Right. Whereas Aaron seems to be fulfilling just priestly, high priest duties.
Sacrifices.
But Moses has this dualism to him, which seems to be hinting at a king and a priest, almost like in the order of Melchizedek. Yeah, like the prophet, just like Yeshua. And we know that Moses is kind of a bit of a foreshadowing of Yeshua himself. So it's certainly a little bit of interesting insight.
So he gives his two older brothers a nod there right at the beginning. Is
Yeah.
there significance to that, or is he just pointing out that he's like a third son?
A third son? Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. That's a good question, but it's certainly interesting. You know what was interesting to me is looking through this genealogy is that there's not been very many generations. I know that there's some confusion in the Hebrew scriptures regarding commentaries about, well, they were in Egypt for 400 years, but actually that's not true. It's actually only about 250 years or something like that. There's some confusion about how long they were actually there, but when you look at the genealogies, you say, well, there's literally only 3 generations. So that certainly they didn't forget Yovah, but they certainly...
They don't necessarily give... it's kind of like the genealogy that's in the Brit Hadashah.
In
There's
Matthew.
a lot of people that are left out.
The
Because
important
the
ones.
scriptures are very explicit about the amount of time going back to Bereshit, or the first book of Genesis, in chapter 15, that Israel will be in bondage in Egypt for 400 years.
Yeah.
And it's mentioned elsewhere too. It's mentioned in chapter 12 of
Yeah.
Exodus, and it's
Right.
mentioned in the Brit Hadashah. And I only bring this up because of the calendar, because
Sure.
the rabbinic Judaism doesn't recognize the 400 years. Now, what kind of craziness is that? I don't understand it.
They don't recognize a lot of things.
You know, here we go to Passover and everything, you know, and Judaism and all of that. We were in slavery and all of that for 400 years, and they take it out.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I understand. That's it, folks. You have a question, yes?
Why do you think that the Pharaoh didn't just kill Aaron and Moses?
That's an excellent question.
He did
It
all
always
the bad
puzzled me
stuff.
too. It's like,
Exactly.
first of all, how?
couldn't.
Well, that's true.
Just
Yes.
simply because he couldn't. Just
Well,
like
theoretically, yes, but
just
logically,
like the 2 witnesses, they could not kill the 2 witnesses.
that's an
until
interesting.
this time.
That's an
But he
interesting
never
comparison.
tried to even.
No, he didn't.
He
And that is
a-
communicated
He
with
couldn't
them.
do it.
I mean, I have
No, we
wondered
could do it.
myself.
Just like we
Especially
can't kill
after
you.
like his son
Or any
died,
of us
first
until
born,
our
all the
time
plagues
is-
never
We'd be going.
seemed to
Right.
want to take it out
He
on
killed
Moses.
Yeah.
and Aaron.
And you know what's interesting to me
Oh.
is that if you've seen the movie like Keith has, you know that it seems rather easy.
It's in the movie.
That's right. It seems rather curious to me that Moses and Aaron are ready, willing, and able, and can capably get a meeting with Pharaoh just about any time they seem to want to. They have remarkable access to the king of Egypt. But you know, I had to think about it like this: if they had Hebrew overseers, and the Hebrew people seemed to, by Pharaoh's own admission, outnumber the Egyptians, they probably seemed to me that Moses and Aaron might be the legal representatives of the people, and therefore might have had some type of minimal right, but at least some right to go in as representatives of the Hebrew people to see Pharaoh. And that, I mean, imagine, if you will, probably for this reason, that if Pharaoh had tried to kill Moses and Aaron, you make a martyr out of them. That's never a good political decision.
Right. And
So-
he went to the Hebrew people first, and
Yeah.
they believed because of the miracles they saw.
And so it's likely that they were, there was a rallying cry. They became the leaders of the union. They're now union reps. In true communist style. Moses and Aaron are leading a strike. Maybe that's why all of our Jewish brothers are communists. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. Let us pray, folks, and we'll have some snacks.